Hi, and welcome to this tutorial of Crystalline, the new reverb plugin by Baby Audio. Crystalline is a pristine and modern algorithmic reverb, tweakable for a wide range of uses. It stands on the shoulders of the classic 20th century studio reverbs, but adds higher fidelity and depth thanks to modern-day processing power and advanced algorithmic design. Additionally, Crystalline comes packed with creative features that users of digital reverbs of the past could only have dreamed about. Crystalline is available for Windows and Mac, compatible with all major DAWs, and comes loaded with a range of presets to get you started. In this tutorial, I will walk you through all of Crystalline's features, explore some of the many ways to use them, and give you starting points for your own musical creations. A final note before we dive in: reverb is an effect that's often most effective when used in moderation. For the sake of this tutorial and to make sure you actually hear what I'm doing, I'm gonna intentionally overdo it at times. Let's go. Let's first take a quick look at the user interface. You can resize the plugin window by clicking and dragging the lower right corner. In the upper left corner, you can change the color scheme. The preset bar at the top lets you load, save, and import your presets. If you click on the Baby Audio logo, Crystalline is bypassed. You can reset any of the controls to their initial setting by double-clicking them. And with the circle icon on the upper right, you can reset the whole plugin to the initial state of the loaded preset. The leaf icon right next to it activates echo mode. In echo mode, Crystalline uses less CPU power by restricting the resolution and deactivating shimmer. The center area of the plugin houses the time and level settings. You can blend between the incoming signal and the reverb with the dry-wet slider. Turn it all the way up when you use Crystalline as a send effect, or blend between the dry and wet signal when using it as an insert. To lock the mix balance while skipping through presets, click the wet lock button. Ducker works like a sidechain compressor. It lowers the level of the reverb every time a dry signal comes in. It's a useful tool to keep your sound from drowning in reverb and make sure the dry signal cuts through. Set the intensity with the slider. If the effect is too intense for your taste, try gentle mode to give Ducker a less intrusive and more natural feel. With start and end, you can set the pre-delay and decay of the reverb. You can set both parameters with sliders, or double tap to enter values manually. The start and end times can also be synced to your project tempo, which is great to use the reverb in a very musical way. Just click the time icons to go into sync mode and select the time division with the sliders. The reflections will now begin and end in perfect synchronization with your track. Let's take a closer look at the start and end settings. With start, you can set the pre-delay of the reverb. If you set it to 0, the reverb kicks in right away. The more you turn it up, the longer it will take for the reverb to start after your sound goes in. This is useful to establish the size of your room. The greater the distance from a sound source to a reflecting wall, the longer it will take the reflection to travel to your ear. So if you increase the pre-delay, the room will sound bigger. At the same time, the sound source will sound closer to the listener. So start or pre-delay is also great to position your sounds in the mix. End lets you define the length or decay of the reverb. The further you turn it up, the longer the reverb tail will be. Crystalline gives you a wide range of decay times, from short and snappy to epic. If you hit the freeze button, the reverb will hold. until you press it again. Rev reverses the reverb tail. This is great to create eerie sounds or interesting rhythmic effects. This covers the center area. Now let's take a look at the 4 sections that contain the tools to shape and fine-tune the reverb. Reflections houses the controls for size, sparkle, and width. With size, you can select the room size, which has a strong influence on the character of the delay. You can select from 5 sizes. Try tiny or small for snappy ambiances on drums or percussion. Medium and large could sound great on vocals.
Overthink tomorrow when we're alright.
Or use vast for huge cinematic synth pads. Because room size can be set independently from end or decay time, you can create some interesting or even unlikely reverbs, like a tiny room with a long decay. Sounds a bit like a metal pipe, or try a huge room with a very short decay. Keep in mind that an algorithmic reverb like Crystalline is a musical tool, so there really is no wrong way to use it. Feel free to experiment with the settings and go with whatever works best for you and your song. Sparkle emphasizes the reverberation of higher frequencies for a crisper, brighter tone. It's great to give sounds more presence and help them cut through the mix. Width lets you set the stereo width of the reverb. You can dial it in from mono to stereo to extra wide. Reverb is most commonly used in stereo because one of its main uses is to add space, dimension, and width to sounds. With Crystalline, you can even go extra wide and fill the stage with larger-than-life sounds. But mono reverb has its uses too. It can help declutter your mix and make room for your main elements to shine. A mono reverb can also be used for some interesting panning techniques. Try panning a sound off-center and send it to Crystalline on a return track. If you turn Crystalline to mono and pan the reverb channel accordingly, the reverb now sits on the left side together with the percussion and leaves room for a different element on the right side. Or pan the mono reverb to the opposite side to balance the percussion out while leaving space in the middle for something else. Depth contains controls for resolution, modulation, and shimmer. Resolution lets you set the complexity and definition of the reverb algorithm. You can choose from 3 levels. In pristine mode, Crystalline will deliver ultra-clean, high-fidelity sound far beyond what digital reverb units of the past could typically achieve. High is the setting that most closely resembles higher-end algorithmic hardware reverbs, still quite clear and crisp, but with some coloration and flavor. On the basic setting, Crystalline will behave closer to a vintage reverb. In this mode, you can hear a hint of the artifacts and resonances characteristic for the earlier algorithmic reverb designs. Basic mode is great to get that classic 90s reverb sound that was used on everything from boom-bap snares to trance 303s. With modulation, you can gradually introduce pitch shifting to the reverb loop, which creates a rich, full sound. Shimmer enhances the length of the reverb tail for higher frequencies. This will give it a bright, ethereal quality. In the lower row, you can select the frequency cutoff and send everything above 2, 4 or 8 kHz into the effect. The upper row lets you select a multiplier to extend the selected frequency range. You can multiply it by 2, 4 or 6 times. So if you select 2K and 4 times, everything above 2 kHz will now reverberate 4 times as long as before. If I select 6 times and 8K, everything above 8 kHz will reverberate 6 times longer. Cleanup contains 3 tools to help you fit the reverb into the mix. Damping controls how strongly high and low frequencies are reflected, effectively filtering them out. Let's say you run a drum loop with a kick and snare through Crystalline. If you turn the lower handle of damping up, it will reduce the reflections on the lower frequencies, but leave the reverb on the higher end unaffected. Now we still get reverb on the snare, but much less on the kick drum. The other way around, we get reverb on the kick and less on the snare. So with dampen, you can make sure you get reverb where you actually want it and avoid cluttering your mix. A natural reverb slowly fades out over time. With gate, you can rapidly end the reverb tail once it drops under a certain level. Adjust the threshold to define the level at which the gate closes down, and set the release to control how long it takes to close the gate once the threshold is passed. Gate on a reverb is an effective way to keep the mix tight and avoid overlapping reverb tails. It also makes for a great creative effect, most famously used on the notorious gated reverb snares of the 1980s. The third control in this section is sides, a mid-side high-pass filter to manage the imaging of the reverb. As you turn up the fader, the part of your sound above the cutoff frequency remains in stereo as before, but everything below is now in mono. This can be helpful when dealing with sounds that cover a wide frequency spectrum. You retain width and space on the mids and highs, but make sure the low end stays compact and tight. The fourth and final section is shape, and it contains 3 tools to take care of the timbre or sound of the reverb. Tone is a tilt-shift EQ that is placed behind the reverb algorithm. Turn it up for a brighter, crisper tone. Or down for a warmer, rounder sound. Vintage algorithmic reverbs have a tendency to build up energy in certain frequency areas, which can lead to a somewhat resonating metallic sound. Classic hardware reverbs often face this issue with fixed set filters that would reduce the ringing but could also muffle the sound. Crystalline has smoothing, an EQ curve specifically designed to attenuate problematic frequencies generated by the reflections and smoothen out your sound as much or little as you wish. Turn it down for a crystal clear, razor sharp sound. Or turn it up for a warmer, rounded off vibe. The transient is the short, loud sound at the very beginning of the waveform. Because it is much louder than the rest of the sound that follows, it provokes a stronger response from the reverb. Take this tom for example. It has a harsh transient and then slowly fades out. When I add some reverb to it, you can hear that it's mostly the bright transient that is reverberated, while the rest of the sound falls short. With the transient slider, I can now shift the emphasis of the reverb algorithm towards or away from the transient. If I turn it to the right, the body of the sound is emphasized and the transient has less impact on the reverb. As you can hear, the reverb sounds less bright now and matches the tail of the tom more closely. If I turn the slider all the way to the left, the transient is emphasized, and now the reverb is even brighter. Transient control is very useful to fine-tune the response of the reverb to your sound. You can use it to put some ambience on the sharp attack of a bass without muddying up the low end. Or tame the reflections of the plosives in a vocal to get a more even, smooth response.
I'ma bust it, I'ma hit, I'ma have to bust it.
This concludes our tutorial. We hope you enjoy Crystalline and this video inspires you and helps you to get the most out of your plugin. Keep in mind, there's no right or wrong way to use Crystalline, so explore, experiment, and truly make it yours. Thanks for watching and have fun making music.
Thank you.